Formation of the Orc clans, 800 years before the Dark Portal. The Ogre Revolt dramatically altered the hierarchy of survival throughout Draenor. In breaking the power of the Ogron and the Gron, the Gorian Empire eliminated the two greatest threats to Gorgron's orcs. No longer confined to their underground caverns, they forged permanent settlements on the world's surface for the first time in generations. The populations of orcs exploded. Before long, overcrowding became a serious issue, and Gorgron's scant wildlife was hunted to the brink of extinction. Tensions between families simmered, but before they boiled over into a catastrophic war, many of the orcs migrated out of the region. They did not need a comfortable existence. Their harsh life underground had made them resilient and strong, but they needed new land to settle. The orcs who remained in Gorgron gradually formed several distinct clans: Blackrock, Laughing Skull, Lightning's Blade, and Dragonmaw. The Blackrock clan lorded over much of Gorgron. They remained in their ancestral caves, studying the earth around them, developing their knowledge of metallurgy and smithing. The unique Blackrock ore scattered throughout the area was difficult to mine and use, but once they learned its secrets, the orcs were able to create astonishing tools and weapons. Blackrock blades were soon coveted for their reliability and durability. The orcs who migrated east found themselves drawn to Tanaan's lush jungles. The region was filled with primals, and the orcs discovered that their new home was tremendously perilous. Though there were no shortage of wild game, poisonous plants and venomous animals thrived in the jungle. One mistake could lead to a slow, agonizing death. It became commonplace to hear forbidding tales about mighty orcs who were paralyzed by a single snake bite and then dragged away into the wilds by unseen creatures. Moreover, there were dark caves and hollows that seemed to vibrate with sinister power. Sometimes the orcs who tapped into this shadowy essence found glory. Sometimes they found madness. Tanaan's orcs population adopted a savage, superstitious mindset. Those who kept their sanity called themselves the Bleeding Hollow Clan. Those who truly lost themselves to the dark impulses of the wilds were exiled. Over time, they formed another, smaller clan, the Bone Chewers, so named for their willingness to resort to cannibalism in time of hardship. The two clans were never allies, but rarely were they at war. The jungle was a dangerous enough enemy for both. The orcs who traveled west of Gorgron settled in a bleak and icy region of Frostfire Ridge, named for its brutal winters and volcanic activity. Some of these orcs believed they should adapt to the environment. Two clans, the Frostwolves and the Whiteclaws, learned to hunt alongside the region's native wolves, even befriending and training them as companions. Other orcs sought to dominate the land. The Thunderlord clan roamed the frozen wastes in huge packs, often hunting the fearsome Gron. A single kill could sustain them for weeks, but when a hunt failed, the orcs would suffer great hardship. The orcs who ventured south found the rich, fertile land of Talador. 3 clans settled in the region's mountains and plains: the Burning Blade, the Redwalkers, and the Bladewinds. A 4th clan migrated farther southwest, deep into Nagran's open prairies. It was known as the Warsong clan, and its orcs roamed the grasslands like nomads, rarely staying in the same place for more than a few months. The Warsongs had to constantly fight against the Gorian Empire's ogres to maintain their presence in Nagrand. Some generations of Warsong thrived more than others. The clan had a taste for battle, but when its warriors provoked the ogres too much, the consequences sometimes proved disastrous. To the southeast, another clan formed in Shadowmoon Valley. These orcs dwelled far from the major Gorian settlements, allowing them to live in relative peace. The Shadowmoon clan became fascinated with the starry sky, and they believed they could glean the future from stellar movements. The region's orcs were a deeply mystical people, and they developed traditions and rituals centered around astrology and ancestor worship. The first shaman. Shadow Moon mystics frequently set out on pilgrimage across the world, hoping to hear the will of the divine. Many of these travelers received strange dreams and visions near the mountains of northwestern Nagrand. Unbeknownst to the orcs, this was the final resting place of Grond. Elemental energies suffused the area, particularly at the base of the mountains. There, the ancient giant's head formed a small island in the middle of a tranquil lake. The first Shadow Moon visitors to this place learned about the world's primordial spirits of fire, air, earth, and water. The orcs treated these beings with the utmost respect, and they named the site of their discovery the Throne of the Elements. The birth of shamanism among the orcs were a gentle process. These children of stone flocked to Grond's remains and learned to guide the elemental spirits with open hearts and a sense of harmony. Unlike the ogres, whose ruthless sorcery tore and shaped the earth, the orc held their power in absolute reverence. And when the elements granted a shaman power, the results were astonishing. Floods could be turned aside. Strong winds could push back Arakkoa riders. No orc had ever seen such miracles. No orc had ever held such ties with the natural world. The Shadow Moon were the first to dedicate themselves to the elements, and they transformed Grond's head into a crude temple. Soon, they spread their teachings to other orcs, and nearly every clan adopted the practice. Young orcs who were raised from birth to be stalwart, steadfast allies of the elemental spirits. When they came of age, these fledgling shaman traveled to the throne of the elements to seek the spirit's blessing. They entered trances to attune their minds to the elements. Some orcs were found worthy, others were not. In the act of reaching beyond the veil of the physical world, a few orcs even found themselves communing with the dark forces. These poor souls accidentally glimpsed a realm beyond Draenor, the realm of the void. What the orcs saw drove them insane. The ones who survived were exiled from their clans and forced to live in seclusion in the caves beneath Nagrand. White skulls were tattooed on their faces, marking them as dead to their people. Those orcs who were welcomed by the elements returned to their clans as respected spiritual leaders. Their counsel was highly valued, second only to the words of the clan chieftain. The bond between shaman crossed clan boundaries, allowing them to mediate arguments and solve conflicts peacefully. The Shadow Moon clan began a biannual gathering of shaman called the Kosh Harg Festival. Soon, this meeting grew to include all orcs. The Kosh Harg became a rare time when the clans could put aside their rivalries, share news, foster ties, and feast in friendship. Talon King Terok, 600 years before the Dark Portal. Despite the growth and migration of the ogre and the orcs people, no clan or empire ever dared to expand into the spires of Arak. The broken ruins of the Arakkoan civilization were thought to be cursed and haunted, and the winged creatures zealously guarded their holdings. The Arakkoa who still called the region home had become dark, troubled, and superstitious. Though they named themselves the High Arakkoa, they were but a pale shadow of what their race had once been. The glory of the Apax's empire had long ago faded. Only fragments of its knowledge remained, much of it pieced together incorrectly. A line of kings ruled over the High Arakkoa, sharing power with the remnants of the Anar order. The priesthood still worshipped Rukmar, but her teachings had become twisted and disordered by time. The Apax's empire had treated Ansu's sacrifice with reverence, preserving Sethek Hollow and studying it carefully to learn its shadowy powers. That respect had long since disappeared. The High Arakkoa now used Sethek Hollow as a place of punishment and execution. Any who disagreed with the Anari priests were deemed heretics and cast into the region's pools, which were still cursed from the blood of the wind serpent god Seath. Most of the unfortunate Arakkoa who were thrown into Sethik Hollow died. The other were deformed and rendered flightless by the dark energies that inundated the area. They became known as the outcasts, and they were exiled from all high Arakkoa settlements. Confined to the ground, the outcasts were forced to contend with a cunning predator in the region, the Saberon. This intelligent feline race roamed throughout Draenor. After the fall of the Apactus Empire, many Saberon tribes had migrated to the spires of Arak. They delighted in hunting the outcasts who could not escape into the sky. For a time, only these cursed Arakkoa were in danger from the Saberon. Then came a Saberon tribe that made it a sport to bring down the Arakkoa who could still fly. The Bloodmen tribe and its mighty leader, Pride Lord Karash, had grown bored with preying on the outcasts. Karash trained his followers in the use of nets, ropes, and harpoons. The Bloodmen targeted isolated high Arakkoa scouts at first, honing their craft without warning those who lived atop the spires of Arak. Once he was confined in the tribe's abilities, Karash declared war on the high Arakkoa. Bloodmen fighters began ambushing large groups of the winged creatures, slaughtering them to the last. This threw the high Arakkoa into disarray. For generations they had imagined themselves as immune to threats from any lower creatures. The Anari priest struggled to explain why Rukmar had apparently withdrawn her favor, and the spires themselves came under siege. The king of the High Arakkoa, Terok, saw his people falling to despair and knew he needed to take drastic action. Before he committed his soldiers to battle, he launched raids by himself, diving into Bloodmen encampments and eviscerating their defenses before a single one of his subjects was put in danger. He single-handedly turned the tide of war, inspiring other exceptional Arakkoa fighters to follow him against suicidal odds. After months of whittling away the Bloodmane, Terok cornered Pride Lord Karash and slew him, ending the source of the Saberon tactical brilliance. The war had been won. The High Arakkoa celebrated their king as a living legend. Some even declared that he must be the reincarnation of Rukmar herself. The Anari priest grew nervous. Until now, only they had been allowed to speak in the Sun Goddess's name. Terok used his widespread support to build a new city in the clouds. It was known as Skyreach, and it would call back to the accomplishments of the ancient Apaxes. Terok even instituted new laws restricting the authority of the Anar Order, declaring that High Arakkoa society must be guided by a thirst for knowledge and wisdom, not by fear and superstition. That prompted the Anari to action. In the dead of night, the priest kidnapped Terok and his daughter, Lithik, and cast them into Sethik Hollow. The next day, the priests told their people that Rukmar had withdrawn her favor from the king and cursed his bloodline. They called themselves the adherents of Rukmar, and they declared that they were to be the stewards of the High Arakkoa's future. Never again would there be an Arakkoa king. The priests would jealously cling to control of their civilization until it ended in fire and bloodshed centuries later. Meanwhile, Terok struggled to endure his new life as an outcast. He had survived the fall into the cursed pools, but Lithik had not. The ordeal had left Terok physically and mentally twisted. Anguished, angry, and alone, he very nearly succumbed to his grief in Sethik Halls. But in the darkness, a voice urged him to move forward. Terok gathered the other outcast Arakkoa and sought out the source of this mysterious voice. In time, the fallen king understood that he was speaking to the dread raven god Anzu. This astonished the deformed Arakkoa. Anzu was revered as a creature long dead, not a being who could still affect the world. The raven god taught Terok and his followers the secrets of sorcery and shadow magic, giving rise to powerful outcasts known as Talon priests. Empowered by Anso's guidance, Terok led the outcasts to ancient Apax's ruins and built the city of Skedis on their bones. This small refuge served as an anchor for their territory. In time, they would assert dominion over the forest near the spires of Arak, and their lands would become known as Terokar Forest. It was a dark, tormented existence. The curse of Sethek Hollow tore at Tarok's mind, bringing him to the brink of total insanity. He desperately sought a solution to his affliction, resorting to brutal methods to find any cure. When he began to sacrifice his own followers, the Talon priests sorrowfully subdued their leader. They sealed him away in the same realm of shadow where Anso had once hidden, keeping him alive by protecting the outcast from his madness. In the centuries to come, the outcasts avoided the high Arakkoa. Whenever the adherents of Rockmar cast out dissenters and heretics, the Talon priests welcomed them into their society. Slowly, the outcasts grew in number, until their population rivaled that of the high Arakkoa.